Hello everyone and welcome back to Scylla's Pocats, or welcome to Scylla's Pocats. It is not precisely the middle of September as I'm filming this, because I just got back from vacation. I had a great time with my friends. But I thought I'd already done so much for my September TBR challenge that I should maybe start talking about these books before we get to another like 40-minute video or something, where I just keep on rambling about the books that I've read. It was a fantastic reading month, so I'm going to try and drop a few reviews of the books that I've already read, which might help in cutting this video a bit shorter than it is, but we will see what happens. So for anyone who doesn't know, and I will obviously be linking the video back again as well where I explain my TBR, I am taking part in the Magic the Gathering Readathon hosted by Steph from Coffee Over Apples, Kaz from Cats and Camera, and Max from Max Reads. It's a lot of fun. It's perfect for people who have no idea about Magic the Gathering and just like joining readathons as well, so that's me right here in case you hadn't noticed. And what you do is you decide what kind of deck you want to do based on the 5 colours of Magic the Gathering, real quick. And then you have specific prompts that your books have to fit in, and you kind of like try and pick your books depending on the colours, the genres, and the prompts that you are actually also supposed to be fulfilling, and then you collect cards, basically. So the thing is, since I have no idea about Magic the Gathering, I obviously also do not have Magic the Gathering cards, because where would I be getting those? We don't have that part. And so I was a bit bummed because I was like, I don't have like a visual representation of how many cards I've already earned with the phenomenal 10 books that I've already read. It's September 10th for anyone wondering. I was having a great time. And I was like, oh man, that's a bit of a bummer, but I might not have Magic the Gathering cards, but I have Wizard cards. And funny enough, I am doing the 3 colours that Wizard also has, which is red, green, and blue. So without further ado, let me show you the books that I've read, briefly talk about them, and give you a representation of how many cards I've actually earned with each and every one of them, with the lovely help of my Wizard Extreme deck. It's now thoroughly butchered, but it's fine. I will be piecing everything back together once this is over. You will be okay, Wizard. You will be fine. Right, so I'm going to be starting, I'm going to be going through the books in order of how much I like them, so I will be starting with the one I rated the least amount of stars, even though star rating is always a bit subjective for me. I'm going to explain that in some video, I feel like. But I'm going to be starting with the book I liked the least, and then I'm going to work my way up to the phenomenal 5 5-star books I've had this month. I had a lot of great experiences, not gonna lie. So without further ado, let's start with the very first one, which is actually not my own, but I've loaned this copy from a friend of mine, and that would be Cinderella is Dead by Colin Bayron. This is a YA fantasy book that is kind of like, it's not a retelling of Cinderella, but as the title suggests, and once you start reading the book, it has a lot to do with Cinderella. Basically, we live in a world where the story of Cinderella is one that every single household has to recite, and the story of Cinderella is also used to oppress women, basically. So every single one of them, like Cinderella, has to attend a ball. They have 3 chances of doing so, and if they do not earn a suitor, so, you know, a male husband, throughout those 3 balls that they attend in their lifetime, which I do believe was 16, 17, and 18? Well, maybe 15, 16, 17. One of those 2, which are horrifically low numbers for getting, you know, married for the rest of your life, but never mind that. And if they don't do that, they are forfeit, which means that the king can basically do with them whatever he likes. So that's great. Our main character is obviously not too pleased about this, and she tries to run away, and she actually meets up with someone who's kind of like from a small pocket of resistance fighters against the cruelty of the king. Alright, so first of all, let's go through the— oh god, I've lost them, hang on. Right, so first of all, let's go through the cards that Cinderella is Dead gave me. So first of all, we have the fact that this is a fantasy book, so I get a green card. Yay. Again, we're using this for representation, don't mind that. I'm going to put that here. Then, as you can see, the cover is mostly blue, so I get a blue card as well. And there is some red on, let me see if I can see that. Here, there's some blood, there's more blood on her face, she's looking roughed up, so I get another red card. And since I've got this from a friend practically the day before I left, which was on the 9th of September, I put this under recent acquire. I'm using the purple ones for these, don't mind that, which means I am getting an instant for this if we're talking in Magic the Gathering terms. Right, so that is 4 cards with 1 book. Isn't that great? So I didn't really enjoy this book, sadly. I wanted to. I felt like some of the characterization was very disjointed. I wasn't, like, I did like the idea of, like, trying to use fairy tales and, like, trying to show people that fairy tales can be used, and also, to a certain degree, stories have been used to indoctrinate people into a lifestyle they really do not want for themselves. And I do think that the book was trying to talk about these issues, but it felt too fast-paced for me to talk about everything the book wanted to address. Because, you know, there was injustice against women, injustice against queer people, because obviously they're going to be oppressed in a system that requires a man and a woman to be wed. It was also trying to talk about, you know, resisting against regimes like that. It was trying to talk about indoctrination, and there was also magic involved, and people, you know, crossing each other right, left, and center. Some of the scenes felt very disjointed, even though, you know, the structure was relatively simple, I would say. And for some reason, it just didn't really land with me, which I'm very sad about because I really wanted to like this. I do think that this is for a younger audience of YA readers, because while our main character, Sophia, is, I do believe, 17, doesn't say so on the back, so I think she's 17. While she is 17, I do think that this might be an interesting YA book for the younger audience, specifically for those who have not really had that much experience with talking about, you know, systemic oppression, in a way, or marginalization of someone. So this might be an interesting starting point for people like that, and I do try to give YA books specifically a bit of the benefit of the doubt, because I'm not necessarily the target audience anymore, but I do feel like this book had a lot of glaring issues when it came to storytelling, when it came to character work, that weren't necessarily because it was YA. So unfortunately, this is taking the lowest spot for September so far. But you know, at least it was a fast read, and it gave me 4 cards, so I'm not going to complain too much. Right, that out of the way, let's get going. The next one, you know what, we're going to go for the cards first. No, actually no. The next one I'm going to be talking about is Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is my second book that I've read by her. The first one was Mexican Gothic, which I really, really liked. As you can see, this cover is just an explosion of colors, so I actually get all 3 of the colors that I'm going for, which is, hang on, let me sort that. I'm getting red, green, and blue for this gorgeous cover, which is really, it's really, really pretty. Then we get a green card because it is fantasy. And I read this as a buddy read for Steph's book club, the Interstellar Club, because this is the current book that we're reading in September. So I get a Planeswalker, and on the, you know, rules or whatever, it's marked as 2 cards, so we improvised. Don't mention it. So that is a whopping, I'm gonna put this down for a second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards for just 1 tiny book. And by tiny I mean this is not even 300 pages. Hooray! Great next start. So, Certain Dark Things is essentially about New Mexico and New Mexico having a vampire problem. Now apparently in the world of Certain Dark Things, vampires are not something super secretive or anything. The only reason that we do have to keep secrets in New Mexico is because New Mexico is famous for having chased out all vampires. Obviously that's not entirely true, as one of the main characters of this, Atil is her name, kind of like provides an example for, because she is indeed a vampire. There were several things I liked about Certain Dark Things, which is why I gave it a slightly higher rating than Cinderella is Dead. I really enjoyed the world building, specifically the different vampire clans, specifically the ones that were like influenced by Aztec, and in general Mexico's past. I found those to be very interesting. I also really enjoyed the points about colonialism specifically that Silvia Moreno Garcia was making when it came to different vampire clans, when it came to how they spread, when it came to very obvious parallels like European-based vampires giving diseases to Mexican-based ones. Sure, we've never heard that before. I really enjoyed that. I also liked some of the characters. Specifically there was one police officer, her name is Anna, and I did really enjoy her character. But unfortunately the writing style wasn't really for me. It felt very flat and almost devoid of emotions. And another big issue I had with this is it's very short, as you can see, right? And there's a lot happening. It's pretty action-packed. We have Atil, who is escaping from her clan being essentially murdered right in front of her, who wants to just escape. Then we have several people who chase vampires for their own reasons, and we have, what's his name again? I think Domingo. Yes, we have Domingo, who is befriending Atil and maybe a bit more, and you know, there's a lot of things happening in Certain Dark Things. And on top of that, Silvia Moreno Garcia had to kind of like tell us about the world building, and the way that she did it was essentially just vomiting exposition every other page. And while I do fully understand that what she was going for and what she was building, especially with the different vampire clans, was very interesting, and I did very much enjoy all of the tidbits of information we got, it felt very much exposition shoved down your throat, and I'm not a fan of that. And I think this is like one of the big issues that shorter media, like shorter books, tend to run into. I've said this before and I say it again, short books are, when they're done well, exceptional because they know what to leave out and what to keep in. And unfortunately, I feel like Certain Dark Things wanted to accomplish several things at once. It wanted to have an interesting story, it wanted to have interesting characters, it wanted to have an interesting world building, and it wanted all of that to be present on page. That's a bit hard when your book is really not that big. So it just felt like it was trying to go for too many things at once, and thus also created like a really big emotional disconnect to me, like between me and the characters. And that was sad because I did really enjoy a lot of the characters. Even the villains were sometimes written with like very beautiful villainous simplicity. I just really hated them. Like especially one of those guys. He was I can't say what he was out loud on here, but I wanted to end his life. From the moment he walked on page. So it was very disappointing to me because I really wanted to enjoy this book a lot more than I did. And I really feel like it just, you know, it all came down to the fact that Silvia Moreno Garcia was trying to do too many things at once in a very thin book that couldn't support all the things that she was trying to go for. Anyway, at least it gave me 6 cards. I'm still, that's a lot. Love that for me. Alright, moving on. So now we're getting into the 4-star category, for which I have 2 books this time actually. First of all we have The Revenant by Michael Punk, and then we have Luck in the Shadows by Lynn Flavelling. So, I'm gonna talk about The Revenant first actually, let's go. So I chose The Revenant as like a nature slash animal element thing, which pretty obvious from the cover I feel like, so that is giving me a creature card. It is a historical novel, so that is giving me a green card, and it also has a lot of red on the cover, so that's giving me a red card, making this a 3-card book. Yay! So in my TBR video, for some reason, I was convinced that this book was about a man who got mauled by a bear and then takes revenge on the bear. I was close. Basically, The Revenant is a historical novel about a real person. His name is Hugh Glass, or was Hugh Glass, and he was an expert hunter and trapper, and he got abandoned on a trail after being mauled by a grizzly bear. And not only did he get abandoned, but the two people who were supposed to stay with him, wait for him to die, and then dig him a grave, also took all of his belongings, including his weaponry, making it a lot harder for him to survive. Which he did, crawled his way all the way back to a Native American camp. I unfortunately forgot the tribe name right now. Then got back to some of the fords that he crossed on the way, only to try and find the two men who abandoned him and get revenge on them. Not the bear. The bear actually dies. I don't know why, but for some reason I was like, yeah, he's gonna take revenge on a bear, obviously. Obviously not, but it's fine. There's a lot of nature here still. I found this to be very fascinating, actually. I had never heard the name Hugh Glass before. This was actually my first time coming into contact with him. And when Michael Punk started describing him, like, crawling his way to safety, and all of the setbacks that he had to suffer, all of the horrible things that he went through, really, in order to get his revenge, it was really good. There's a lot of perspective shifting in here, which I found very interesting because it creates a lot of very unique tension moments, especially in one where we first follow Hugh Glass, who is paddling, I think, upstream a river, and then he hears someone else coming downstream and he hides because he's afraid that this might be someone who's hostile towards him. And what he doesn't realize is the man passing by him is actually one of the two men that he was trying to get for his abandonment, which almost resulted in him dying. And the only reason we, as the, audience know that is because Michael Punk uses both perspectives to kind of like shift back and forth between Hugh Glass hiding from who he assumes is someone hostile towards him, versus the man that he's actually trying to find just continuing past him. And honestly, I am excited to watch the movie. It's on Netflix, actually, which I didn't know, so I'm gonna do that at some point. And also, I will say, I know that the movie is pretty long. I think it's like 3 hours long, and I know that this book doesn't really look that big, but to be quite honest, there's a lot of scenes where Michael Punk kind of like summarized an entire stretch of miles that Hugh Glass, for example, must have covered. So I do see why the movie is as long as it is, because there's a lot of potential for them just like expounding on some scenes, because they were really cut short in this book. So yeah, it was really interesting to read. Surprisingly smooth for a historical novel that so closely tried to follow, what actually happened. There's also like a part at the back of the book where Michael Punk kind of like explains where he expounded upon things, where he tried to take from the source material he had available as closely as possible. And there's also like kind of like a summary list of what happened to the main characters in this novel, aka the actual historical figures existing after the novel ends, because it's obviously not going on for years and years. It starts in 1823, and I think it ends in 1824. It doesn't really take that much time. Maybe 1825, but that's pushing it. So yeah, that was actually a really cool read. I still think it might have been cool if he'd taken revenge on the bear. I'm just saying. Come on now. You had the opportunity and you didn't take it. That's sad. Anyway. So the second one that I gave 4 stars is Luck in the Shadows by Lynn Fabelling. This is a somewhat older fantasy series, and the reason... Don't fall out. The reason I found this so exciting is because it is canonically gay. Hooray. So I took this as a book in a series because this is the first book, as I said, in the Knight Runner series, which gives me an enchantment card. It is also fantasy, so it gets a green card. And there is red and blue on the cover, so I get a red and a blue card, making this a 4-card book. 4 cards, 4 stars. There we go. Luck in the Shadows follows Alec, who is a young man, I think he's 16 or 17 when the series begins, who gets thrown into jail because why not? He's wrongly accused of treason, I believe. He's never done anything of the sort. Poor guy. He gets thrown into prison, and at some point another prisoner joins him. His name is Seregiel, which is something that Alec only finds out later, and Seregiel is a very, you know, good spy master, etc, etc. Lots of things going on in his life. Alec gets to know about every single one of them. Well, not really, because Seregiel is a cheeky little bastard, and I love him very much. But Seregiel busts both of them out of prison, and after spending a few days with Alec on the road, because Alec and his father were kind of like guiding a lot of people back and forth between villages, and Seregiel was like, I don't know where I am, and Alec was like, I do, where do you want to go? Boom, friendship formed. After spending a few days with Alec like that, Seregiel actually asks Alec if he wants to become his apprentice, to which Alec, after a certain time, somewhat reluctantly says yes. I say somewhat reluctantly because Alec first believes that Seregiel is a thief, and Alec is not about that dubious business. Famous last words. It turns out Seregiel is not really a thief, though, to be fair, also yes. But he's more a spy master who is, you know, upholden to a, how to call it, secret community, I guess. And the reason he wants Alec is because he sees a lot of potential in Alec, and he wants to, you know, make him into someone much like him. I'll say it right now, if this is a mentor-mentee romance, I'm going to be so elated, because the chemistry between these two is off the charts, and I would take anything. Like, they can remain friends, they can be family, they can be lovers, and I would take all three of them in a heartbeat. It's fantastic. I really enjoyed the characters, they were so much fun, especially Alec and Seregiel, but there's a lot of other characters and supporting cast, and while the book definitely has more main male characters, including obviously Seregiel and Alec, it has a lot of supporting cast that is made of women, and what I really enjoyed about them is that every single one of them, even if they're just featured very briefly on page, have their own motivations for doing things, and they have their own reasons for being the way that they are, and they get some exploration, however brief, in the storyline, which is something I've really, really enjoyed. The only reason I'm not giving this a 5-star or like a 4.5 star or whatever is because there was a lot of exposition in the first book, and like not a lot happened, like in terms of like a grand story arc up until the very end, which then felt a bit rushed, even though this book is almost 500 pages. Like every single time Seregiel and Alec sat down, Seregiel was trying to explain the world to Alec, and while the book kind of like also made a bit fun of itself by going something like Alec being like, there's too many names, Seregiel, Jesus Christ, slow down, I cannot keep up. It was a lot, and I fully appreciate the fact that the first book definitely has to build up the world and everything, but I do feel that sometimes Lynn Flevelling was going a bit overboard with the exposition conversations. Like, it wasn't happening in the narrative, which is something I do appreciate. Like, they were talking out loud, which might still be somewhat clumsy every once in a while, but it does feel a lot better than a narrator who, for some reason, is all-knowing, is telling you everything. But there were a lot of conversations like that, and at some point it was just like, alright, Lynn, we get it, it's fine. Can we talk about these, like, far-off kingdoms in, like, the second book or something? We're not seeing them right now anyway. Calm down. But apart from that, I had a lot of fun with this book, and I'm really excited to continue with the series. I have the first 5 books, actually. And depending on how my reading goes throughout this month, I might actually start the second one already. We're gonna think about that. But anyway, really nice introduction to the series. Really, really love the characters. So if you're looking for something that is, despite its size, relatively fun and quick to read, I do recommend you pick up Luck in the Shadows, if any of what I just said, you know, made you intrigued. So next up, before we get to my 5-star books, we have one last one that didn't quite make it to the 5-star line, and that is the first bound-up volume of Dorohedoro by Hayashida Q. So this is a manga series. There is, I think, 23 volumes in total, and the German editions have bind-ups, all of them. This is the first 3 volumes, and I do believe that every single other bind-up volume has 2, I think. I have already watched the anime, and I do believe, if I remember correctly, that the first bind-up I have doesn't go past the anime, so I wasn't necessarily surprised by anything going on in here. But I just love this series, man. It's so crazy. Like, legitimately nothing makes sense in here. So we have the hole, which is where our 2 main characters, Nikaido and Kaiman, are living, and the hole is basically used as some sort of dumping ground for magicians. Magicians go there to perform their experiments on people, which is as gruesome as it sounds. And Hole, basically, like, the community of Hole has nothing to do against that. Hole is also like a very decrepit place because no one cares about it, and the second people start caring about it, magicians come and, you know, ruin everything again. So that's fun. And the basic premise of the series is that Kaiman was cursed to become a man with a lizard head. And he doesn't know who did it, he doesn't know why he looks the way he does, and so he has been trying to find the magician who did this to him and to kill that magician so he can regain his former self, his former face back. Nikaido is a woman that he got to know. They have a really fun relationship, because it's not romantic in any sense of the way, but they are family, which I really, really love. Nikaido is also fantastic. I love her very much. The cast beyond that is just as crazy as the entire world is. Noi is still the love of my life, and if she would punch me in the face, I would die, and I would say thank you very much. So, I don't really know how to explain Dorohedoro beyond what I just did, because you can't really explain it. Beyond the fact that there is, like, the general story arc of Kaiman wanting to find out who cursed him and also how he looked prior because he lost his memories before, you know, whatever happened. Every single volume basically has like its own small story nestled in between, which I really enjoy and appreciate because it makes the reading experience a lot more fun as well. So there's that. Now, since Dorohedoro is a manga, I took it as that prompt, which means that I got a saga card for it. I'm gonna put this down real quick because it's heavy and also I want to show you the cards. So there is a lot of red on the cover, so we get a red card. There's also a lot of green, not a lot, but there's some green on the cover, so I get a green card. And this is both a fantasy and an action manga, so we get another 2 cards. So that is a total of 5 cards for the first volume of Dorohedoro by Hayashida Q. I'm really excited to continue with the series because the anime obviously doesn't cover everything the manga has done, so I'm pretty sure that like come the maybe second and at the very least 3rd bind-up volume, I'm gonna get a lot of stuff that I've never seen before, and I'm really stoked for that. Alright, and now we get to all the 5 stars. I'm gonna try to keep this brief because I do want to film individual reviews for most of these. So we're gonna start with the one I don't think I'm gonna do an individual review on because it is a non-fiction. And that would be Mito Sanyal's About Emily Bronte. This is written in German. It's a non-fiction where Mito Sanyal basically talks about Emily Bronte, and more specifically she mostly talks about Wuthering Heights because, you know, it is the Emily Bronte work, even though she also wrote a lot of poems. I chose this as a published in the past prompt, and also, as you can see, the cover is extremely red, so we get 2 cards for this, which is the minimum, but it's fine. She's doing a lot of heavy lifting. This was a very short and surprisingly quick read for a non-fiction. This was phenomenal. And while obviously it did stay somewhat broad on certain stuff every once in a while because of its, you know, brevity, I do think that it covered a lot of the bases it wanted to cover. So once you've read this, I mean, if you can read German, to be quite fair, because I don't think this has been translated yet. Once you've read this, you have like a general grasp on what people talk about when they talk about Emily Bronte and Wuthering Heights, and you can do your own research based on that. Mita Sanyal talks a lot about race, she talks a lot about class, she talks a lot about Emily Bronte, who has been mystified as this wild creature who roams the moors, even though she was probably the one who did the most in the household of the Bronte sisters. And I really, really enjoyed reading this. Again, for a non-fiction, it just flew by. Like, I was expecting it to be a fairly quick read because, you know, it's very, very short. And I'm gonna show you this real quick. The font is also pretty big and the margins are pretty big. So as you can see, this looks like a fast read, but it was non-fiction, and you never know with non-fiction. So I was like, I'm gonna try and read this as fast as possible at the beginning of the month because I'm really curious, and also because I don't want to take another book with me on vacation. And it was faster than I thought possible. I will be quite honest there. So I was really surprised and I really, really enjoyed this, and I'm definitely going to do a lot more research on Emily Bronte now because I really did enjoy Wuthering Heights for all its fucked upness, really. So yeah, for all of my German-speaking friends who have even a passing interest in the Bronte sisters, who have read Wuthering Heights and really liked it, if you want to have another opinion on the book, I do highly recommend this one. It was a lot of fun to read. It is broken up in different parts, different sections that talk about different things concerning Emily Bronte and concerning Wuthering Heights. It's really comprehensible. Loved it. Gets an absolute recommendation from me to everyone who is able to read it, because again, it's in German and I don't think it has been translated, so whoopsies. Anyway, moving on. I'm going to try and keep this brief, as I said, because I kind of do want to try and see if I can film reviews for every single one of them, but we will see if that happens. So the next one I chose gave me 3 cards. One for Backlog, which is a sorcery card, one blue one because it is Litfic, and one blue one because the cover is blue, and I am talking about Gut Symmetries by Jeanette Winterson. This is my second book that I've read by her, and by now I can just say that her writing style is impeccable. Full stop. Gut Symmetries is about, I've actually forgotten her name because she's a first-person narrator. Alice. This book is about Alice, who falls in love with Jove, who is, like her, a physicist, but much older than she is, actually. And he's also married. And his wife, Stella, finds out about that. And so Alice and Stella have a confrontation, but instead of, you know, both being just extremely angry at each other, they actually fall in love. And so Gut Symmetries talks very meanderingly about love and how love works its ways, and it's very brutal in some of its ways. It's very oblique. So if you're not a fan of meandering, almost purple prose, if you're not a fan of a book never getting to quote-unquote its point, because the point is to experience it, I wouldn't recommend Gut Symmetries to you. I feel like this is a book that is very divisive, because people are either going to love it for the qualities that it brings to the table, or they're going to hate it because it doesn't really get to a point, because there's no point. It's also it's very much not necessarily trying to assign blame to anyone. All of the characters do kind of shitty things. We have Jove, who apparently is, you know, has been cheating on his wife multiple times. We have Stella, who is also, not necessarily mentally stable. There's an entire chapter once she finds out that is just, it's so beautifully written, because it is the perfect blend of an unreliable narrator, but an unreliable narrator that is very openly telling you that her exact words are basically bullshit. Because she keeps on going like, I am not jealous. I'm not a jealous wife. And you're like, yes you are, and you know you are. And that tension that creates, beautiful. I loved it so much. Yeah, I'm gonna try and see if I can do a review on this. I just don't know if I can do it justice. But I really, really enjoyed reading Gut Symmetries. It was beautifully written. The writing style was everything I wanted to be quite honest. 5 stars. I started reading it, I read the first 2 chapters and I was like, unless something absolutely horrific happens, this is going to be a 5 star, because I'm such a sucker for that writing style. It's just gorgeous. That's all I'm going to say. Gorgeous. The next 5 star that I got to read, and this one was a surprise for me, because like with the Jeanette Winterson book, I was expecting the writing style to pull me in from the get-go, because that was also what pulled me in with her Frankenstein book. This was a grab at a bookstore because I really liked the cover, and I'm talking about The Dragonfly Sea by Yvonne Adhiambo Owour. Look at that cover. 5 star. Just for the cover alone. I'm kidding. So The Dragonfly Sea is a historical novel, and apparently, which I didn't know, it took inspiration from a real-life event that happened, I believe, in 2005. Because what this book is talking about is basically, throughout the Ming Dynasty, I do believe more towards the end than not, China had a very well-known admiral who traveled massive distances via sea and had a lot of sea voyages, most of which were, you know, very lucrative for China, and his name was Zheng He. Now, what you have to know for this novel is that, apart from the fact that he also, you know, visited Africa and everything, and opened the trade with a lot of African states, which, countries, I'm sorry, which obviously probably didn't have the exact same geography as African countries do now, he also got lost on his last sea voyage, and no one exactly fully knows what happened to him. It's very questionable. But what happened in 2005 was that on the Kenyan coast, on one of the islands there actually, a girl was discovered who people believe through DNA testing and everything was a direct descendant of Zheng He and his men who got lost on his last sea voyage. And that is essentially what The Dragonfly Sea is picking up on. Our main character, Ayana, is basically that girl. The author makes it very clear that while she drew on those, you know, stories, Ayana is by no means the actual person this happened to. But basically what happens is, this is a coming-of-age story of Ayana, who at some point gets discovered by Chinese officials and declared a heritage person because, as I said, she shares DNA with Zheng He, and she gets a scholarship to go to China to study there and to kind of like spread the word, basically. This book was so fascinating. So first of all, I really enjoyed the writing style. It was very, very beautiful. I also really enjoyed the fact that there's a lot of languages mixed in with the writing style. Obviously we have Chinese, we have Kenyan, every once in a while we had other languages peeking through as well, depending on what the people were speaking. Like at some point I do believe there's, is it Arabic? I think there's Arabic in there as well. And more often than not, the author actually chose not to translate them, which I found very interesting, because you basically had to kind of like guess, either because the word had already appeared or because of the circumstances, what the word could possibly mean, which I found very interesting. The whole idea of language being spoken is also like a great deal in the book, narratively speaking. Like, for example, when Ayana finally learns English, there's a lot of talk about how the English language warps everything we touch as Kenyans, for example, and how a lot of people, you know, it touched onto so many things as to how language can be tied to identity, for example. Identity in and of itself is also a really big theme of this book, like Ayana trying to find herself. Again, this is very much a coming-of-age story, and I loved it. It fascinated me from page 1 to the very last page. It made me emotional over things I didn't even consider possible. It's beautiful. I don't necessarily recommend this book for people who have a very hard time, how to phrase this, who have a very hard time not seeing family structures as very rigid, as in, you know, you have a mother, you have a father, and then you have a child. Don't do it to yourselves, because this is not what the book is doing. But I highly recommend The Dragonfly Sea to basically everyone who even found this remotely interesting, what I just said. It's really, really, really good. So, as I said, I bought this super recently, so now we're going through the cards real quick, and I'm going to put this down, even though it's a shame to hide that cover. But I put this as a recent acquire as well, so that gives me another instant card. As you can see, there is a lot of red, blue, and green on the cover, so that is 3 more cards. And it is also a historical novel, so that's another green card, giving me a total of 5 cards for the Dragonfly Sea. 5 cards, 5 stars. Beautiful. We're almost to the end, guys. You've almost made it. Aren't you proud of yourselves? Right, so the next 2 were books that I highly, highly anticipated, and I made myself wait for at least one of them very long, for what felt for me very long, because I wanted to use it as the commando post, as the 5-star prediction, which I could only do after having read 1 of each of the other 7 ones. So I think I was a good girl, okay? But we're gonna talk about that one in a second. What we're gonna talk about first is He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. I knew that this was going to be a 5-star read the second I picked it up. I was not disappointed. No notes, no notes. It made me cry in a public park. I definitely do want to film a review on this, so I'm just going to put it very briefly. It was the perfect continuation, and it perfectly wrapped up the duology, in my opinion. It made me feel a lot more for the characters than the first book did. Not that I hated the characters in the first book, I absolutely didn't, but I felt that there was a certain emotional disconnect, purposeful emotional disconnect, in the first book. And I feel like that was not the case in the second one. These assholes made me cry so much. It was so good. There's so many interesting and amazing quotes in here. And like, as a small tidbit of what I want to talk about in my review, one of the things that intrigued me the most, apart from the fact that this book also continues the very interesting, you know, look at gender that Shelley Parker Chan has throughout the duology, there's also a very interesting perspective on how people treat their bodies in this one. And I really, really loved that. So yeah, no notes. I cried like 3 times. I have so many post-its in here. They feel very nice when I do this. Go read this duology if you haven't already. Do yourself the favor. It's so good. So in terms of cards, I used this as another buddy read because we were buddy reading this in Sarah's book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries. And by buddy read, I mean 2 people have read this book so far. Hi Josh, if you're watching this. So we're a bit alone in the All Spoilers channel right now, but it's fine. So it's a buddy read, which gives me another Planeswalker and 2 cards. It's incredibly blue on the cover. So I got a blue card, and it's this weird mixture between historical and fantasy, so I just get a green card for the genre in general, because one of the 2 is gonna hit. So that is a total of 4 cards for one of my most highly anticipated books of this entire year that did not disappoint whatsoever. And now I kept this for last because it's the captain's prompt and it felt appropriate, but also because I finished it like, I don't know, an hour ago or something. Everyone who knows me knew that this was gonna come. I'm obviously talking about Labyrinth's Heart by M.A. Carrick. This is the final book in the Rook and Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick, an author duo, and no notes. I can now confidently say that this is one of my favorite trilogies to ever exist, basically. I think if I want to be super nitpicky about this book, I want to say that there were a few moments where the wrapping up of several of the story strands that were left from the first and second book felt a tiny bit too convenient and maybe a tiny bit too fast, based on all the beautiful suffering that we had in books 1 and 2. That's one nitpick. Another nitpick is that for a bit of time I thought that the climax that we were writing towards, specifically from the second book onward, was not going to happen the way that I thought it was. I was kind of wrong in the end anyway, so who cares? Again, these are nitpicks because I genuinely don't know how to find anything in this book that is not just a nitpick. Basically, books 1 and 2 raised the bar so high that book 3 kind of like struggled along on the 5-star rating, but like I still absolutely loved it. I think this book would definitely benefit from a reread for me personally though, because I do feel like they threw in a lot of very new concepts in book 3, and I don't know if that's just because I'm an idiot and I forgot things they already prepared us for in books 1 and 2, or because they genuinely were like, oh shit, wait, hang on, we need to wrap this up, so we need to find something else. There's specifically one character and his past, and I kind of want to see if that was kind of like alluded to before, because I genuinely don't remember. If it is, I'm taking every single thing back I said about that potential possible nitpick. But yeah, I loved it. The big theme for this is a found family is everything, so I cried. I'm on my period right now, this didn't help. I'm fine. Anyway, so I'm actually going to put this to the camera now because I need everyone to look at this, okay? The eyes are blue. That counts as blue. Great, because we're going to go over the cards now. As I said, this was my 5-star prediction read, which made that my commander read, which means I get a whoopin' 3 cards. Ye fucking huh. And because it is fantasy, I obviously also get a green card. And because the eyes are blue, and so it counts, I get another blue card. So that is, once again, let me hold that up, 5 cards for a 5-star read. Yay! Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna try and see if I can make reviews happen of as many of the 5-star books as possible. My thoughts are already slipping away into the abyss, so I might try and film them relatively soon so I can get them out to you guys, because I would love to talk about these in more depth, but if I don't remember them, it's not gonna happen. But overall, I would say that so far September has been a fantastic reading month. I had like 2 disappointments basically, and that was pretty much it. Everything else was at least a very solid enjoyment. And I mean, I've read 10 books and 5 of them were 5 stars. Let that sink in. So, you know, Steph, thank you so much for the opportunity, because some of these books I have been wanting to pick up for a while now, actually, and this finally gave me the opportunity to do so, and as you can see, it worked out great. So, yay! First half, almost half of the month, success, I would say. Right. Feel free to tell me in the comments down below how many books have you already read and how many of them have you enjoyed? How is your September reading month going for you so far? Because I kind of hope that I'm rubbing off on you a bit, and I hope that you've also had great experiences so far, because we love great reading experiences. They're everything to us. So I hope that you've had some too. As always, I hope that you guys have a nice reading experience and continue having a nice reading experience, and I will see you soon.